Welcome to another episode of the Book Brothers podcast, the only podcast where people who like books talk about books. There is no other podcast like it, folks. It's just this one. But in all seriousness, I'm here, of course, with my co-host, Mr. David Cardoso, aka Baby Sagan on the social webs. Welcome,
Yes,
David.
I'm
And
here, Adrian.
of course, I am here, Adrian Del Toro, aka Boots Too Big, Books Too Big on TikTok. I'm trying to start up a new, well, I already have the account. I'm trying to add more content to it, including this podcast. But yeah, welcome to this is our sixth episode, I believe.
Yeah, number six. Number six. Yeah.
Lucky number six. But yeah, here we are. Today we're talking about a very interesting science fiction dystopian novel written by the late great Octavia Butler, Parable of the Sower, which is actually number one in the Earthseed series. I think it's number one of two. That's a great. I love that cover, by the way.
Yeah, my new fancy copy. It looks really good. Yeah. Actually got mine at Barnes and Noble, so
Nice, nice,
nice
nice.
fresh copy.
And as far as the story, so I'll just give you a quick breakdown. When a global climate change and economic crisis lead to social chaos in the early 2020s, well, 2020s, oh no. California becomes full of dangers from pervasive water shortage to masses of vagabonds who will do anything to live to see another day. 15-year-old Lauren Olamina lives inside a gated community with her preacher father, family, and neighbors, sheltered from the surrounding anarchy. In a society where any vulnerability is a risk, she suffers from hyperempathy, a debilitating sensitivity to others' emotions. Precocious and clear-eyed, Lauren must make her voice heard in order to protect her loved ones from the imminent disasters her small community stubbornly ignores. But what begins as a fight for survival soon leads to something much more, the birth of a new faith and a starting vision of human destiny. That is Parable of
Epic.
the Sower in a nutshell. And it's very apropos that we read this in the current cultural and political climate we're in, which I'm sure
Yep.
we'll get into. But David, let's start with you.
Okay.
What did this book do for you? Like, what did this book make you feel?
It make me want to burn it. No, I was gonna I wanted to burn this thing. No, I was gonna
That's
uh
Fahrenheit 451.
yeah, wrong book. Yeah, this book is simultaneously because when you started, Adrian, you said it's like, "Oh, I'm really vibing this book. I really like this book when I started," and I definitely felt that too initially. But I also saw how like dark and twisted and messed up this world is, and then we both kind of acknowledged like how depressing it is. So it is a very sad read. It gets darker and darker for the characters. Because it starts with do you actually remember the name of the town? I'm trying to remember the name of the town that she
Well,
starts off in.
aren't they going to Olivar or a town named Olive something? Like they
Yeah.
because they
Bolivar,
decide
and
to
then
move
there's
to
another town. There's another town like
yeah,
Rodrigo, I think it was called.
something like that. I
Yeah.
don't remember. It takes place in the greater Los Angeles area.
Right. Yeah. So it's in SoCal. And like the whole town, it's like this, she's the son of a preacher and he's, very strict and everything. What's crazy about it too is like the walled off community. They're a walled off community, and basically they're a well-to-do kind of poor family initially. Like they're better off than they're just a walled community of mostly black, but there's some white people there too. And the book also touches on race a little bit. But they're a walled off kind of, I would say, what would you say, like middle class family? They're probably like middle class mostly.
Yeah, I sort of interpret it as they were like lower middle class, like
Yeah.
they weren't suffering on the streets so much, but they were not, they obviously they weren't super wealthy because I think
Mhm.
they allude to the uber wealthy in this world live in gated communities, but like with more security, more servants, more people,
Yeah.
more separated from
They're more separated. Yeah.
everybody else.
And so they're a walled off community. And then we see early on, like there's these beggars and homeless that sometimes come in to their area. And they they actually there's this drug in the novel too that these people get addicted to outside and they cause all these fires. We learn about that more like throughout the book. Was there a fire early on or there's hints about it? I think people hear about these fires because they can see like smoke in the distance on early on, like
There's several
hear about it.
fires throughout the book, actually.
Mhm.
I don't remember all of them specifically, but I know that's a big part of it, like this world they're living in, is
Yeah,
if when people want to get rid of
burning
something,
down.
they just burn stuff down. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, it's just there's a lot of sad. Like I would just say it's like initially I still really loved it because her writing style is very, even though it's a very sad, depressing book, it's also just very like eloquent and like beautifully written because it's very simple, but also just it keeps the pace moving the whole time. It does add a lot of elements of like scripture and religious passages too, because the character herself, what's her name? Is it Lauren? Laura? Laura
Lauren.
Lauren Olamina. Um, yeah, I really liked her character a lot because she's like starting this kind of new faith because she doesn't really vibe with her father's faith because all these bad things are happening and she sees what's happening with the poor. Some people sometimes people steal stuff from homes, sometimes they burn homes down. You hear other terrible stories of people getting abused, like some other wives getting abused by their husbands, stuff like that, and other calamities happen, but then so she starts kind of her own faith. She starts jotting in her journal, which I really kind of liked how she's like trying to find she's trying to search for her own kind of God, her own kind of meaning in this world that she sees like all the chaos around them. I kind of vibe with that. I also really like her hyper empathy. Um, I think I don't know how sensitive you are, Adrian, as a person, but if you're a very sensitive, like empathic person, it could be
Oh,
kind of
I'm
like
very sensitive.
you're
I'm
very
the most
sensitive.
sensitive
Okay,
person you're ever going to meet.
okay, okay. Really? All right. But
Not really.
yeah. Oh, okay, okay, okay. But like, man, I'm a pretty sensitive person, especially for like guys and stuff like that. So, but it's just interesting that like I just really like how she like played into her own super vulnerability, She like plays that up a lot where she's like, yeah, I have this like debilitating illness where if someone's in pain that she feels the pain and she almost like faints and stuff like that because she could feel like their pain,
Yeah.
exactly what they're doing. So like when they go out, when they early on when they go out and they see these wild dogs because the dad wants to have them go practice hunting for these to get used to guns and stuff like that. They see the wild dogs like eating these corpses and stuff like that. And I think there was like one guy that was still partially alive, I think, if I'm remembering that correctly. But
I
anyway,
don't. Was that when
yeah,
they were on the freeway up, walking on the freeway going up north?
this is early in the book. This is early in the book. So this is
Okay.
like when they see bodies and stuff like that, corpses. But anyway, she feels the pain of anyone that she comes in contact with, both early and then later on in the books when they have to like harm people and they have to attack someone, and she can like feel their pain. She feels like the cut and everything, and then so what happens on later in the book as they're like wandering around and it's more like every man for himself. She ends up having to like shoot people and kill them because it makes her pain go away faster. Um, Now I'm not that sensitive where I have to like, shoot people or anything. Nothing like that. I wouldn't go that far. But
Not
I just thought it
yet.
was a cool. I thought it was a
Not with
cool.
that attitude.
Yeah, yeah, no, I guess not. I thought it was a cool character. I think it's cool having a very vulnerable character like that because I think a lot of the religious, especially like Dune or something, like in Dune, like Frank Herbert made Paul Atreides like this superhero, this godlike character who's like nothing can touch him. And then here it's like everything affects her and she's afflicted by everything. So I kind of like that. I thought that was a different touch. So yeah, I don't know if you want to add to her
Well,
character, Adrian.
I think I thought the idea of her being a hyper empath was interesting because I interpreted it as the Octavia Butler saying we lack a lot of empathy in this world,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that really resonated with me because I feel that way now with
Hmm.
the current world we're living in, right?
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
I've felt for a long time that we don't have enough empathy anymore.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting. There's so many, God, well, I'm sure we'll get into it. There's so many parallels to this book and current and the current age that we're in. And it's just like
Hmm.
that's why it made me so uh depressed in the sense of like it's just like it's hitting so close to home right now with
Hmm.
everything going on with the leaders that we have in charge, and not just here but everywhere, and just
Yeah.
just the current, like I said, the current societal climate that we're in. And I thought that was so interesting that, like, to me it was like, okay, she's saying that all people should be like Lauren. I think all people should be hyper empathetic because that's what makes us human. That's one of the many
Hmm.
things that makes us human at the end of the day. But this character is living in a world where it's things are so bad that she is one of few people that has this level of empathy for her own, for humankind. And it's just like
Yeah.
it's crazy. It's crazy because it's realistic.
Yeah. Kind of.
So
I
I thought
wasn't
that
sure.
was
I
such an
don't know. I
interesting.
don't know if Octavia, if Butler, if she was trying to say like everyone should be like her, because like I think there was even I don't know if her dad says it early on in the book, but like doesn't a character mention like oh that's like a debilitating illness, or they kind of like mock her a little
Well,
bit?
and that's the thing, right? Her dad is a preacher.
Yeah.
And I'm not a religious person,
Kind
as
of a
you know,
douche.
but I grew up Catholic, right? So
Hmm.
I know
So did
what
I. So
religion
did I.
is. I know what it
Yeah.
means to people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like if you're not part of that herd, that if you're not a sheep in their herd or whatever, they see you as an outsider. And I think her dad saw her as an outsider. I think that's why
Yeah.
she kind of gets a hard, she gets a, he gives her a hard time because,
Hmm.
he's so ingrained, or he's so, entrenched in his religion and stuff that
Hmm.
anyone who's like outside of that is 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 different, you know what I mean? Like he was sort of like
Yeah.
othering his own daughter in a way. And
Yeah.
I find that so interesting because just because of my own personal views on religion and stuff, right? So
Yeah.
this book hits so many like
Yeah. It
checkpoints
really
of
does.
things that
Like,
interested
yeah.
me that are
I don't know. Yeah.
relevant in the world we're currently in,
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, like this book, literally, like this is probably, I mean, we'll give it a review later, a rating, but like just it has like a little bit of everything, really, you know? It's kind of crazy. Although it's kind of weird, they talk about it being science fiction because that's initially why I had wanted to bring it up, and then I think we read it, you and I, but it's pretty much just a dystopian, like a modern day
Yeah.
dystopian novel,
It's
pretty
it's
much.
way more on the dystopian side than the
Yeah,
sci-fi side. I mean, and that's
yeah,
fine. I mean, there is some. I think there's some very subtle hints of science fiction in there, as far as like some of the technology that she alludes to a little bit throughout the book. But it's
okay,
way more of a dystopian story than anything else, and a
yeah.
very, very, like I said, just very topical dystopian story.
Mhm. What would you
And
say?
the book takes place in 20. It starts in 2025,
Yeah, yeah.
which we're currently in right
Is
now.
it does it start in 25? No, it started even
Yeah,
earlier.
it
It
starts in
was
like
2020,
25 and it ends
2024. It
or
starts in
24,
24,
sorry.
and
It
then it
starts in
quickly goes to
24.
25, and then it's
Yeah.
mostly in 25, 26.
Yeah.
And I believe it ends in 27, I think it is.
Yeah.
Or yeah, I think it's 27. Um, but yeah, it's just I don't know, it's just it's a crazy ride because it gets worse and worse for the characters. Like by the halfway point, everything is burning. There's a spoiler alert, but the climax pretty much it kind of builds up to like their whole town just burns down, and then Lauren has to escape with a couple other of her fellow neighbors, and then they have to go basically. They travel north pretty much to they're going like to Sacramento mostly. They try to like they're thinking about going to San Francisco for a time, and they gain other followers, travelers. And
Yeah.
then that's also what's interesting too, is it then becomes this almost very religious saga because she has to leave her hometown. And then she gets this traveling vagabond group that they're all these weirdos that have no home.
Yeah.
And then it's almost like her disciples, because
Oh
then
yeah.
that was a very big theme as it would continue along. Like she's building this
Yeah.
religion. So,
That was very much like a Moses lost in the desert for 40 years type of
yeah,
stuff right there.
right.
The
Hmm.
religious parallels were not lost on me at all. But you know what
Yeah.
the biggest nightmare I think, David, since you're someone who lives in the Northern California, the
Yes.
biggest nightmare was Northern Californians having to deal with Southern Californians moving up into their territory.
I know. Like, get out of here. We don't want you here.
Yeah, for those of you, for those that don't know, there's kind of not an animosity, but there's kind of a passive oh, what do you call it? What's the word for, when two teams are against each other? I
Oh,
can't think of the
rivalry?
word.
Rivalry?
Rivalry. There's a passive
Yeah.
rivalry
Rivalry.
between
Yeah. Yeah.
Southern California and Northern California for
Maybe.
some
Yeah. Yeah.
weird reason. I guess it's
Yeah.
because California is such a big state. It might as well be
Yeah.
like,
It's basically a country. So, yeah.
yeah. You don't say the what's the big thing they say up in NorCal? Hella. You don't say hella a lot. I never heard
Hella?
you say.
No. No, I don't
That's a
really.
see, that's a Northern California thing. We don't say that in Southern California, but
Yeah. I don't say it. So,
yeah.
I think the Bay Area may be a little protected, but I
You're
don't really.
but you were born in the Bay Area, right?
Yeah. I was born
Okay.
over there. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the other thing too, right? Is it's interesting. I thought it was interesting that they're migrating from Southern California to Northern
Hmm.
California and they're migrating to Sacramento, which
Yeah.
is like not the Bay Area, but it's still it's still like, the Northern California is known as to be more expensive than
Hmm.
Southern, but I guess it's for different reasons in this story. Um
Yeah, yeah.
I think there's less, maybe I read this wrong, but I feel like there was less chaos and less violence the more north they went, right? Which is
Uh,
why they were doing that, or
I
did I read that
guess. I
wrong?
mean, it was kind of sporadic. There was like less. Maybe it's because like there was less people throughout, so they're wandering, and then they would come across like an attack, or there would be a house burning once in a while, and so you'd read about that. Because like down south, it sounds like it was more packed in. And so there's more like dense areas with filled with lots of people, so you'd see it more often. But then once they left, then it was still dangerous because then it was like every man for himself when you're out of the town. So then it was still dangerous, but it was like maybe more sparsely populated, maybe because they would still come across fires and then they'd have to like steal stuff and um yeah, and then she meets this old guy with oh yeah, I thought it was funny too, her boyfriend. So she does have a boyfriend early in the book, and then I believe we don't know for sure if he died. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one. Like she doesn't see him die, but it's
Yeah.
implied that he does die.
I took that away as well, that
Okay.
they don't explicitly state what happens to
Yeah.
him. She tells us what happens to her brother early on. Her brother is
Mhm.
found dead and mutilated
Yeah.
by
Right.
by a gang, by gangs, by
Hmm.
street gangs,
Hmm.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But her boyfriend, I don't remember her mentioning what exactly happens. I thought
Yeah.
she was something along the lines of, I haven't seen him for X amount of time, so I just have to assume he's dead because in this world, that's
Yeah.
the way it is.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that was so bleak to me. Like,
Hmm.
obviously, even in real life, you don't just make that assumption right away, but how bad do things have to be in order for you to like make that assumption so quickly? That's how
Yeah.
dystopian this story is. And
It's
but
pretty. It's
the thing is, I don't think we're far from it. You know what I mean? In a lot of ways.
I think you hinted that before when we texted about it. You're like, I don't think this is so far off, and I'm like, I don't know.
No.
I still think it
Well,
is. It is kind of.
there was
It's
something
pretty crazy.
she couldn't predict, like social media and
Yeah. Yeah.
how
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
division and discourse that
Right.
would cause.
No.
Like
Yeah.
if Octavia Butler was still alive, I think she would be shocked at like how much worse it is in some aspects.
Hmm.
And just, she's probably rolling in her grave right now, just
Yeah.
seeing
Yeah.
what is going on. But
I think. Yeah. I think social media predicting that was almost impossible. And now we know the effects of it, but I think it would be almost impossible to come. Who knows what's going to be the next 20 or 30 years too. But yeah, speaking of her brother, you mentioned her brother early on. That was one of the hardest, like the harshest things that happened early on because like her brother ends up sending them money. So he ends up like abandoning their family and he basically runs away because he doesn't like the father. He gets beat by the father. So he leaves the house. And he's a teenager. I forget how old he is exactly. But and Lauren's like when the book starts, she's like 14, 15, I believe, when it starts. Um but anyway, yeah, so the brother leaves and then he's able to like get a bunch of money, but we don't know how he gets the money. And he ends up like a couple times he'll come back and he has brief conversations with Lauren and he never hints at what he's doing. So it's either like drugs or some kind of like maybe, you know,
yeah.
maybe sex prostitution or something. Like we don't know.
Well, I thought, see, that there's that connection between that and his death, right? I thought that
Mhm.
like the implication was that he got involved with the wrong people,
Yeah. Yeah.
and whatever he did to get that money, he probably had to pay it back. He probably owed it to them, or
Mhm.
maybe he just straight up stole it,
Yeah.
and then the consequence of that was him getting
Right.
killed by them.
Yeah. But that was just a big like foreshadowing event right there of just how dangerous the world is like outside the walled community. So that was a pretty big blow when he died and that was like that hit Lauren like pretty hard. Because
You know
then
what's
then she
crazy?
starts hinting about like, oh now I want to leave. She then starts with like, oh, she's gonna leave. And then
Yeah,
turns out her home burns down, the whole town burns down, and then off she goes. So
yeah. Well, what I was gonna say is that this show, they start off in the Los Angeles
Mhm.
area in a fictional neighborhood of LA. And what she describes, I immediately in my head visualized Skid Row in LA,
Okay.
which I
So
don't,
you can use
if
that.
you know what Skid Row
I've heard
is.
of it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I know.
it's
Yeah.
there's more homeless people in LA than there are people in Wyoming. Did you know that? And
I can believe that.
Skid Row is like, yeah, Skid Row is like the epicenter of like the most dystopian,
Okay. Yeah.
terrible things that you could imagine.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
if you were to film this movie as a movie today, you could just film it on Skid Row and you wouldn't have to change a thing.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
how bad it is. So, Skid Row is like a microcosm, I think, of what this story is.
Hmm.
And that's just so depressing to think about.
Yeah. Yeah.
That it's here now. It's not as
Some people
far
definitely live it.
wide.
Yeah,
What's that?
some people definitely live that kind of brutal, harsh reality, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I think it does hit home that she wrote this book back in, when was this published? Like late 90s, I believe it was.
It was early 90s. It was like
Early
92 or
90s.
93 when this book came out.
This is when she published it, and reading it now and just how much it hits home with, like, I would say that just the class struggle is like the main focus of the book, the wealthy and the poor, I would say, is the big one. Would you say that's like the big theme of the book, Adrian?
Oh man, there's so many themes. I mean, a class
I
struggle
know.
for
I would say
sure.
that's the biggest. Class struggle is probably the
Yeah.
biggest, but I don't know.
I think that
There's so
is the
many big
biggest
ones.
one because it's always about haves and have-nots. And
Mhm.
like I said, she doesn't explicitly talk about how the wealthy live in this world. Like she mentions like the current administration. She mentions like the president, the
The
fictional
president, I
president.
thought that was pretty interesting too. He sounded kind of like Trumpian almost. Like he didn't sound like quite as bad as Trump, but then you could tell his policies. He was kind of like more conservative minded, probably.
Very authoritarian coded for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
And
I think his name was Donner in the book. Yeah.
yeah, and then she like mentions, like I said, like the really wealthy live in more secure gated communities, but she never
Hmm.
goes into exactly how they live. Like she never goes into like
Yeah.
what she's read and seen and heard and observed about the wealthy in this world.
Hmm.
She only talks. It's only really from her perspective and how she lives and how she sees the world around her. And I think
Hmm.
that's enough to really like drive home the fact that like there's a huge split between the world she lives in and the world of other people that don't have to deal with this stuff, the
Yeah.
wealthy, the
Yeah.
the
For sure.
not the proletariat. I think the proletariat is like the main working
Kind of
class people, right?
poor working class.
And
Yeah.
then,
Yeah.
and then I think in 1984, what is it? It's the proletariat and the state. The state is you
On the
know,
state. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
something like that. I don't remember,
Yeah.
but you get what I'm
Yeah.
saying. Yeah.
Right, right. But yeah, class struggle is probably like the big, big one, I would say, as for themes. But of course, we touched on the religious themes as well, which I actually really liked. I don't know what you thought about the religious themes. You seem kind of like you could take it or leave it. I liked seeing those scriptures because she would be writing her own scriptures throughout. That's how the chapters all begin. Let me see if I could. I really
I
like
mean,
them.
yeah, it made sense for the story.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Right.
I like it.
Yeah, like that made sense for the story and the world she's in. I mean, she's the daughter of a preacher for crying out loud. Like, of course, she's still gonna
Right.
have some of that religious.
Mhm.
Uh, she's gonna, lean towards religion in some form or another.
Yeah.
But me personally, it didn't resonate with me in the sense of like, because I'm not a religious person, so it didn't really
Yeah.
resonate
Neither am I.
resonate
Yeah.
with me in the sense of like, oh yeah, like I can really see someone using religion as a coping mechanism, which is what her character is doing, I think.
Pretty
I
much.
think that
Yeah.
that's really the whole point of that aspect of it is that she's
Yeah.
using her newfound religion that she's making up as a coping mechanism for the world that she's living in, and that makes
Yeah.
100% sense, right? That makes total
Yeah.
sense
Yeah.
considering
Um,
how violent and terrible this
Oh
world
yeah, yeah.
is.
I know. Yeah, it's pretty terrible. Yeah, some of the scriptures I really like the passages, and I always kind of find whenever I'm reading, I always like to think of religion and as more like a literary tool. So I don't think of it in the I'm more like you, like agnostic atheist. So it's like I don't really vibe with religion, but it's just like I use it as more of a, like you say, it dives into the psychology of the character a lot, and it was just interesting to see her like cope with that, and so she makes up her own faith. And yeah, like one of the passages is this one she repeats a lot. The destiny of Earthseed is to take root among the stars. Like I like that one. This is the cool one. And then she views God as change, which I thought was pretty cool. Like God is change. She repeats that like time and time again.
See,
God
I
is change.
like
God is
that.
change.
I like that. You know why I like that? Because I think she's viewing religion not so much as like, we have to follow it in the literal sense, in the
Yeah,
dogmatic
yeah,
sense. It's more like religion as a philosophy.
yeah,
I think for her,
yeah.
it's more like a newfound philosophy
Hmm.
than it
Hmm.
is religion in the traditional sense of like,
Yeah,
God said this and we must obey these laws and we must, you know what I
yeah.
mean? Like it's not like that. It's more of a
Hmm.
philosophy,
Yeah.
more of an as a philosophy. So
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Yeah, she has that
and I
quote.
like that aspect of it. That does
Yeah,
I can.
yeah. Just think of it
Get
in
down with
terms of
that.
literature. It's a tool for literature. Just use that.
That's a great way.
Um,
That's a great way.
yeah. Yeah.
That's a great way to
I
put
like
it.
to think of it that way.
Even
Um,
Dune does that, right? Even Dune
yeah.
has like those
Right, right,
types of,
right.
you know,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know what
And it's,
religion is in Dune, but you know what I mean.
yeah, yeah. It's really the nuns there. The what's the name of the
The
nuns?
Bene Gesserit, yeah.
Bene Gesserit, yeah, yeah. But yeah, like just like Dune, how it has those opening passages, it has some bits of her scripture that she's written down. Just like Dune has that, like, different passages about Paul. Um, but yeah, the idea of God of change. She has a good conversation with the older black man that they meet later on in the book when they're traveling and everything's burned down. They have a conversation about her religion and faith, and the guy's talking to her about it, and he's like, "Oh, do you want to, like, do you believe in God and stuff like that?" I think he addresses it directly to her, and she's like, well, "I don't believe in." She basically says like, "I don't believe in the God of, my dad or my preacher dad." She's like, "God has changed." She almost, and then she brought up Buddhism. And then she also brought up Lao Tzu, like the Book of Changes, the Tao Te Ching. I thought that was pretty cool how she
I don't
just
know anything
combines all these
about
other
that
faiths,
one.
and she's like, she brings up all these other different religions to come up
Yeah.
with her own, and that God is not some like person, it's just this idea, it's a philosophy. So that was pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah. Like I said, I can get down with that aspect of it because
Mhm.
especially, given the world that she's living in, like of course you're gonna need something to cope.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um,
I think we all would if it was that bad.
yeah, yeah, you're surrounded
Pretty down.
by violence and it's like
Yeah,
how do you not turn to
yeah,
something in order to get through it day to day,
yeah, for
My
sure.
biggest hell is opening Excel at work every day.
Which
Which
can
is
be
not
terrifying in its own way.
yeah, it's
I don't
exactly,
know.
but it's all
Maybe
relative,
it's more
right?
like the humdrum of everyday life kind of
Yeah.
thing.
One
Right.
person's
Yeah.
hell is not another person's hell, you know. I'm sure your hell is different than mine and
Yeah.
anybody
For
else,
sure.
I don't know what yours would be.
Yeah.
Maybe you can
Yeah.
lend some insight on that.
My personal hell. My personal
He
hell.
pleads the fifth, Your
No,
Honor. No, I'm just kidding.
I know. I'm just gonna plead the fifth on that one. I'll come back. That'll be a topic on another podcast discussion. We should do that for another like 20-minute discussion. That'd be
I
pretty
like
good.
that. Yeah.
Personal hills.
What is our person? Yeah. Good stuff.
That requires a deep conversation. One other theme I wanted to talk about, and then I'll bring it over to you if you want to like bring up something. But one other thing that I felt was really important in this book was the idea of like addiction, because everyone outside the walls is addicted to this chemical called pyro, and then that causes them to, well, they call it pyro because everyone burns places down, and like they end up like all the homeless and all the violent criminals out there, they're basically like they set something on fire and then everyone flocks to it and it's almost like they're like in they just like stare in rapture at like the flames and stuff like that. And I thought that was a crazy. And then they shave their heads or whatever, and they like color their faces or their heads like green and blue and other colors. Like what the heck? Like I was fascinated with the idea of addiction. Speaking of Skid Row and all the other homeless, problems we have, like that's just a big one that really hit me a lot. Even though that one's like probably not the biggest thing, but it's an undercurrent. That's why this world is so violent. Like there's homelessness, there's poverty, and there's drugs, and
Well,
it's
yeah,
all
I mean, and that's one of the many other things that she got right was drug
Mhm.
addiction. Right
Yeah,
now, it's the
that's huge.
fentanyl
Yeah,
epidemic,
yeah. Hmm.
In her book, it's called Pyro, but
Yeah.
in real life, it's fentanyl. And
Yeah.
if you know anything about fentanyl, it's a horrible, horrible thing. You know what
Oh
I mean?
yeah.
Like it's. I was watching some videos on it the other day because I was curious, about it, yeah, it's basically junk heroin. It's like heroin,
It's
but
even more
like
powerful.
it's garbage heroin,
Yeah.
because I'm not speaking up for heroin here, but I'm saying
No, of course
when you do
not.
that, the high lasts a while. On
Okay,
fentanyl, it lasts for a very short amount of time, and it's just as addictive as heroin. So
I
you
see.
have to take it more and more and more and more
Yeah.
often to chase that high. It's
Okay.
crazy.
Yeah. But
It's
it's also I believe it's 50 times more powerful than
yeah.
heroin. That's what I heard. It's like the strength of it is
Oh
like
yeah,
insane.
it's way more potent, but the high
Yeah.
doesn't last as long, which
Oh,
is
okay.
crazy.
I know. It's
One of the videos I watched explained it, and I forget
weird.
what it was exactly, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's such a crazy thing that
Yeah.
it's
Hmm.
more potent, but you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Fentanyl is very dangerous. Like, and I've heard of horror stories too, where like I think some people like lace it with like cocaine and other stuff, so you don't know. You never know,
Oh
like
yeah,
on the
yeah,
streets, people can like mix it with stuff, unless it's
yeah.
terrible. It's like,
Some people have overdosed on fentanyl without
addicted.
knowing it because they bought
Mhm.
something else that was laced
Yeah,
with fentanyl,
mix
and
with it. Yeah.
yeah, that's crazy too. That's scary, you know.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't do drugs, so I don't have to worry about it. But you know
That's
what
why
I
you
mean.
stay away from drugs, man. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
why I'm glad the older I've gotten, like for all the kids out there, I'm glad the older you get, the longer you stay off drugs, the easier it is. Like just don't
Yeah.
bother with them. You know, it's just easier to say that. Do
And
not
to be
bother.
clear, alcohol is also a drug, but you know,
Yes.
you also want to do less of that as you grow
Oh
older.
yeah,
And don't,
for
you know, I
sure.
love beer. Don't get me wrong. I
Okay.
enjoy a good IPA, but you know,
We know you do.
you
We
can't.
did. You did have a podcast, right, back in the day?
I used to have a beer
I I think I
podcast,
remember
yeah.
that back in Denver one time.
So, but not anymore because
Yeah.
you know, too old for that now.
Yeah.
Now it's one of those little things you just every now and then, you know,
Yeah.
a nice glass of bottle of beer, but that's it, you know.
Okay. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, just it really talked about addiction and stuff. That really was like a big one for me. I was like, man, like, because I'm thinking too now, like both now and in the future, I was like, is anything gonna be done about the drug problems like in our country at all, or is it just gonna be
No.
continuing going? Are they gonna
The
be drugs
answer
that
is
don't come
no.
up? Yeah, it's just like it's just a thing that's just gonna keep coming up, and
I
yeah,
mean,
I don't know, it's
the
sad,
war
but
on drugs has been an abject failure in my book,
yeah,
you know.
oh yeah, it's been absolutely
The war on almost anything is always going to be a failure. You know,
some
in the
extent,
early
yeah,
2000s, it was the war on terror. Well, we still have terrorism, you know.
yeah,
And since the 90s, it's always been a war on drugs. And guess what? We still have drugs,
yeah,
as we mentioned.
yeah,
It's not going to go away.
hmm
It's never going to go away. In fact,
yeah, yeah,
it's probably going to get worse before it gets better,
yeah,
if it ever does get better. I don't think it'll get better in our lifetime, honestly. But you know, that's the thing. That's what I like so much about this book is everything that she brings up is they're not predictions of what she thought was going to happen. You know, the great thing about science, sci-fi, and dystopian literature and whatnot is that it's putting a mirror up to society that the author is
yeah,
currently living
yeah,
in
yeah,
and
hmm
saying, you know, this is how it could be in the future still, you know.
yeah, yeah,
And I think she saw the writing on the wall even in that era, and 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 it seems like a prediction because we're currently living in this era where there's so many parallels to it, you know.
hmm hmm
And that I think that's what makes it such a good book, man. Like it's
yeah.
just yeah, it hits close to home, but it really has to. It really made me examine like you know just everything as far as like how things are. And
Mhm.
yeah, I couldn't have read this book at a more relevant time. You know, like I'm glad we
Yeah.
chose this book because
I know. Yeah. Well, I had heard about it in another book club, and I was like, I gotta read this book because they said
yeah,
it takes place contemporary. So I was like, oh, we gotta read it because it's like takes
yeah.
place now. So
Because
that's a
everybody
cool thing
talks
about it.
about, you know, 1984 and Fahrenheit
Mhm.
451 and
Mhm.
Brave New World
Yeah.
and those are all great stories, of course,
Yeah.
but I think this book is the most relevant futuristic dystopian novel you can read, you know.
I think it's, yeah, it's very relevant and it's also like the most realistic probably of all those.
Yeah.
1984, Brave New World are definitely like big idea sci-fi. Like we'll probably never be exactly in that world, you know. But this one definitely felt like this could actually potentially happen. Like, and in some cases, probably is in some homeless communities, you know, or you know, maybe not with the constant burnings, but at least with like the violence and like the drugs and everything. Like, there's definitely a lot of that and theft, you know, all that stuff. Like, that's definitely happening in a lot of places. So,
Yeah, I mean, this felt more grounded than
yeah,
1984, for example,
yeah, yeah,
just because,
hmm
like, yeah, we do live in a surveillance state, but it's not as hyper crazy as it is in 1984.
yeah,
Whereas this book, I don't, it just felt grounded. Like,
Mhm.
I can easily see, and worse, actually. I think, like I said earlier,
Oh, yeah,
I could see this book and worse happening, you know,
hmm
now and into
yeah,
the future.
sure, yeah, yeah, I
So,
think so. Yeah. Um, yeah, so anything else you want to talk about the book, Adrian? Any other points you want to bring up? Any
no,
crazy things that
I really appreciated reading this book. Like I said, I think Octavia Butler is no one I don't think she gets talked about enough as just as a
yeah.
writer. And
hmm
she has a really interesting story. You know, she sort of just her story if you know anything about how she came up and stuff. I mean, she wrote short stories that were accepted into like publications that published short stories and she kind of
hmm
went from there, you know, because she was someone saw her talent very early on,
Yeah.
and that's how she was able to make it in the publishing world or the literary world, I should say.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think she was very attuned to like the ills of society at the time, and she was able to turn out this great book about it.
Yeah.
And there's another one. There's a second book which
Yes.
I may have to pick up sometime.
I did pick up that book because this book was so good. I had to pick up the sequel. So whenever you
Nice.
want to read it for the podcast, we should dive into that because I'm very
Yeah,
excited for the sequel. So it
I,
looks promising. So
I think that would be interesting. And
yeah.
yeah, that's really all I have to say. I gave this. I'm on Storygraph. If you don't know what Storygraph, it's like a better
Okay.
version of Goodreads. I
Okay.
gave it 4 stars out of 5 on on
Okay.
Storygraph.
Four
Um, I
stars.
I thought it was just a really good book.
Very tough critic. 4 stars. Interesting.
Yeah, 4 stars, man.
Octavia Butler just not cutting it. Like,
I
not good.
burned through this book. Well, I mean, 4 out of 5, that's pretty good, you know.
Yeah, I know.
I burned through this book, and
Okay.
I was not, see, the problem that I have is that I will sometimes listen to books, read books, well, read books in general, and
Yeah.
sometimes I'm just not, it doesn't capture me, you know.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I just have to suffer through it because I like to
Yeah.
finish books. I don't
Yeah.
mind turning off a TV series or cutting halfway through a movie I don't like, but with a book, I feel like I have to finish it.
Okay.
And I didn't have the issue that issue with this book. This book, I was so enthralled by the story that I
How
didn't
long did it
realize
take
how
you?
quickly I was getting through it, you know.
How long? Like 2 weeks or something? Or
Uh,
that's
yeah, well, I did the audiobook, which we won't get into that whole thing,
oh. Let's
but
talk about
yeah,
that again. No,
I listened to
yeah.
it every day for yeah, for a couple weeks, and yeah,
Okay.
got through it
Nice.
really fast.
Very nice.
So
Okay. Well, we're talking about stars. I'm gonna give this one a 5 out of 5. I'm gonna give it a
okay, well there you go.
yeah, yeah. I gotta give it a 5 out of 5 because like we talked about all the themes. Like it has the religious themes, it has the race themes, has the addiction, it's got homelessness, it's got the class stuff, it's got a little bit of everything, and it combines it into this character who kind of she's starting her own religion in a way, and but it does so much more authentically and like realistically than other dystopians, and it takes place in modern times. Pretty crazy. Um, I think the hardest part, I do know this is the one thing that I was having a hard time. I was like, do I give it 4.5 or 5? Because it is so sad, it is so depressing, it is so dark sometimes where you're just like, man, I just gotta put this book down. There was a couple times where I'm gonna put this book down. I'm gonna take a moment, like I was like, I'm gonna take a day break from this book because it was like, oh man, all this dark stuff, you know. But I don't know. I give it a 5 out of 5. It's pretty excellent. So really good.
Well, the other thing I wanted to say really quick about it was I like that it ends on a note of hope.
Yes.
As dark as everything is,
Yeah.
she does leave off on some semblance of there is something better and brighter on the horizon. And
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that. I honestly thought it was going to have a dark ending. I
Okay.
didn't think she was going to die, but I thought she's probably going to end up alone, like everyone around her was going to die, and she was just
Okay.
going to be wherever.
Right.
But no, it actually like they make it to their destination, and they want
Mhm.
to start like a farm, a
Yeah.
commune type
Start a settlement. Yeah. Yeah.
settlement. Yeah,
Yeah.
and
I did like the ending a lot.
yeah, the ending was good. The ending leaves you feeling like, okay, there is hope for this
Right.
person in this world, and maybe we'll find out what
Um,
happens in the second book. We'll see.
yeah. But yeah, the town, the settlement, I'll briefly talk about that. But yeah, the settlement at the end is called Acorn, which I really like too. It's like this, new seed. They're gonna, bring it
Oh,
to
that's
life. So
right.
it'll build
Yeah.
things. Acorn, that was pretty cool. There's good symbolism there. And then just the fact she gets with the older black gentleman, so now they're together, they're a thing along with the other couples along the road. And also, what's kind of cool is they also get a bunch of children and babies along the way. So now think of the town Acorn. So it's gonna like they're gonna grow new kids there. They're gonna grow food there. They're gonna have like families there. So like there's even the promise of like families, which is kind of cool. And then she's gonna start her new religion or whatever. She's gonna be the new preacher. So that was kind of interesting. So we'll
Yeah,
see how it go. We'll see how it dovetails into the sequel because I think it'll be pretty interesting where she takes it from there.
yeah.
Yeah.
I hope that in her new religion, instead of breaking bread, they break Kartoffelpuffer.
Yeah, yeah. Talk
You
about
get it. You
my
get
son. Yeah,
it. You get
yeah, I
it.
get it. I get it. Let's talk about that in a little bit. Speaking of toffee puffer, I need to make some. But
You made me hungry. You made
I
me
know I never
hungry.
made that. I still need to make that
It
stuff. Yeah,
looks delicious.
yeah, yeah. Are you looking it up right now?
I have it
An
pulled up.
image or toffee puffer. Okay.
It looks like a pancake and a hash brown had a baby with a
Kind of.
side
Yeah.
with a
Yeah.
side of applesauce.
Yeah. If the audience doesn't know, yeah, Kartoffelpuffer is a German potato pancake,
A
and it
German
looks and
potato
sounds
pancake.
delicious.
Yeah,
So,
you
yeah.
put a little sour cream on that, a little
You
hot
can, yeah.
sauce,
You can put whatever you want
maybe
on
maybe
it,
a fried egg. Ooh,
yeah. Yeah, it looks really
baby, you
good.
got a breakfast going.
Oh yeah. It looks pretty good, yeah. Pretty good. Thank you for
Anyway,
that reference.
so we're switching gears now, right?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. You want to move along?
We're
Oh yeah, what before we fully move on,
oh
I
yeah,
do
of
want
course.
to
No, sorry, go ahead.
give some extra props to Octavia Butler because as you mentioned, have you ever heard of her before? Like before we started
Oh
reading?
yeah,
Because
I've heard of this book for a long time,
okay.
and it,
Well,
it
I
always
heard
makes
of the
that
book.
list on Book Talk as like the
Okay.
must-read dystopian
Yeah, yeah.
novels.
I heard of the book, but I had not really heard of Butler, and I just discovered her for the first time. I was like, "Who's this writer?" I thought she was like excellent. I was like, I never had heard of her, and that made me want to read more of her, just because there's passages in the back of an interview with her, and she talks about her her love of science fiction, which we love too. So I thought that was pretty cool that she is a black author who loves science fiction and combined kind of everything into one, all her inspiration. So I thought that was pretty cool. So I would like to read more of her in the future as well. So there you
Yeah,
go.
no, definitely.
Yeah.
Ditto on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're on the subject of dystopian novels, and thought we could talk about that a little bit before we get into
Dystopians.
one last thing on the show. But yeah, what are your what actually? Yeah, since we're on that note, what are some dystopian novels that you want to read that you haven't read yet?
Oh, I was gonna say Parable of the Sower. So, dystopian books that I want to read? Well, I don't really have a list of dystopian books. I do have a list of books that I have read of dystopian books.
All right,
Most of the famous ones that we talked
what's one of
about.
your favorite? We did Animal Farm not that long ago. We did
Yeah.
uh um Left Hand in Dark, which wasn't really a dystopian story. That was way more of a sci-fi story. But
Yeah.
yeah, what's one that stands out to you
It
besides
would
this one?
be yeah, it would be 1984 and Brave New World are my two probably favorite ones. I probably like 1984 a little bit better, but I also read Brave New World.
And that's one I
Very
have to read. I think what's the dystopian aspect there? That it's like a caste system, a hyper caste system with like
of
where
Brave New
everyone's on
World.
drugs or something.
Yeah, Brave New World. Yeah, yeah. So it's very similar to 1984, except it's the exact opposite authoritarian. It's basically everyone is entertained and everyone has drugs. So that it's kind of like everyone's mass like entertained and comfortable with everything. They have like all this high comfort, high technology. And they do have this drug. I think the drug is called Soma, if I remember. It's been a while now. But everyone like has on this drug and they're all entertained by like television and commercials and everything. And whenever
Which
they
is
feel
very
pain, they have
relevant,
this drug. Yeah. Yeah. And we
But
were just talking about drug
there's no
addiction too.
central
So.
authoritarian regime. It's just
No,
the
wait,
society is just
I
like
believe it was
that.
just, yeah, the society and state because you want me to tell you the opening a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, a little
Okay,
bit.
the opening is basically like humans are basically grown in a factory. Like you're predestined. Basically, they grow you from a vat. Like you're basically like a little embryo, and then they grow you. I mean, we can do that now with in vitro and everything, but you're grown in a lab, and then you're made into a baby, and then they figure out like what role you'll fit in society, and they just pick that for you. And so it's kind
Right.
of
So there
like
is a
societal. It's not really
predetermined
like a
caste
character, but
system.
it's like, yeah, yeah. So it's like this very caste class-based system.
Yeah.
And then everyone is entertained while they're living their life and on these drugs and everything. But pretty much you're predetermined who you are going to be. That's kind of like,
I mean, that doesn't sound too far off either.
yeah, maybe not. I don't know.
I'm serious.
Yeah.
Entertainment for the masses to keep them,
Yes.
satiant and not having to think about the bigger issues that are happening. Yeah,
Yeah.
that doesn't sound too far off. I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
that's actually,
Right, right.
that's something we
Mhm.
can relate to in the current
So,
world.
yeah.
We should do
Very
that
interesting.
next,
Although it would
honestly.
be great, it would be great for me. It would be great for me to reread it because I remember the ending too is pretty dark.
I have
But
it.
it's just
I
an
have it
interesting.
too.
It's a good book. It's a good one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's do that next, actually. Yeah, hold on. It's right here. I on my
that'd be a good one.
bookshelf next. Yeah,
Brave New
it's
Worlds.
right here. Oh.
Okay, nice. You got a newer copy of it. I have an older copy, so but yeah, that'd be a good one.
Yeah, I think it would be good because I feel like we're kind of on a dystopian kick right now.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know what is this mechanism? Did you ever figure that out? I never understood what that was supposed to be.
I don't know what that is. I'm not sure.
And I have it bookmarked because I did start it, by the way.
Okay.
I've had this for years, dude. I've had this before my kid was
Okay.
born.
Okay.
And I have a bookmark after chapter 3. So I got 3 chapters in.
Okay.
But yeah, let's do this next because
We
I
could
feel
dive into
like
Brave New World. Yeah, yeah. It's
yeah, I
pretty good.
have it now and why not, let's
Yeah.
get into it.
It does remind me. So another one that came to mind as far as dystopian. So we got Brave New World. Got 1984, of course, the classic. Um, Probably one of my favorite books is 1984. But another one I was thinking of, I don't know if you've heard of this book. It's called Infinite Jest. Have you ever heard of Infinite
Oh,
Jest? You know that book?
Infinite Jest.
Have you
Infinite
read it?
Jest. I haven't read it. No, I have not
Okay.
read it. But
Okay. Thoughts on that?
I know about it in the sense of like it's one of those books that people on Book Talk
Uh-huh.
say either you if you've read it, you didn't get it, or if you're saying you got it, you're full of it because this book is just so
Okay.
dense and so all
It's
over
so
the
dense.
place.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's necessarily true because I have not read it. I know that it's a
It's
huge
huge.
book. It's
Yeah.
like over a
Big.
thousand pages,
Yeah.
and it's like it's not genre specific, right? It's like kind of
Not
a mix
really.
of.
There's dystopian elements, then there's just suspense elements, and I don't know. There's a whole backstory. I read the first like 100 pages of Infinite Jest, and I have to be honest with you. When I was reading it, I was like, I don't think I could read this by myself because I was just like, it is really dense, and like also David Foster Wallace, he did this technique where he would like his sentences, they would be like almost like run-on sentences.
Wasn't he considered a genius?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's considered something, Everyone has their moments. No, he's a smart guy and everything, but he's still a great writer in some respects. But I just like that the style of the writing, I had a hard time with it because like some of his sentences were kind of like really long and like just kind of unnecessary. He's almost like showing off in a way. And I'm just
He has a very uh
yeah,
difficult to grasp kind of writing style. I don't know.
yeah. So yeah,
How far into it did you say you got? Do you
about
remember?
90 or 100 pages out of that huge book. So maybe if we feel like diving into that one, we could dive into that one
I
eventually.
don't want to do that one. I'll be honest
Okay,
with you.
okay,
I feel
okay.
like if we attempted to do that one, it would take me a year to finish it.
Okay,
Um,
okay. But anyway, just I brought up Infinite Jest because it does have a dystopian element of like the drugs. So people are on drugs and people are mass entertained. So that kind of brought me up that Brave New
yeah.
World. So that has that element too, where that one really goes into heavy into that, where everyone's like just watching TV all the time and everyone's just on drugs. And like that was like a big point of that book. So kind of came to mind.
Yeah, Infinite Jest is up there with like Gravity's Rainbow and like Finnegan's Wake and like books that
Oh,
are
okay.
very hard. Well, Finnegan's
Very.
Wake is mostly just gibberish, so that one really is
Yeah.
impossible to read.
Yeah.
But like Gravity's Rainbow is another one, and
Okay.
like even like
Heard that one.
anything by what's her name, the author that wrote Atlas Shrugged,
Yeah, Ayn Rand.
Ayn,
Ayn Rand.
very divisive author.
Yeah.
I won't get
Yeah.
into that right now, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I would be interested in Infinite. Maybe not right now, but maybe like sometime in the future.
Maybe in
Maybe
the future, if we
I think
continue
for
on
now we
with
should
the
stick with
stories.
Brave New
Yeah,
World.
that sounds good to me. That
I
sounds good.
feel like it's also very relevant based on what you're saying, a very
Yes.
relevant
Yeah, yeah.
story.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. It'll be
So
good for me to read it again because I want to get to that ending again because I know there's a character in there that what happens at the end is pretty sad with him, but I want to like just revisit that book again. It'd be kind of cool.
for sure. Well, yeah, I mean, so you've read that one, you recommend that one, and we'll do that one for book club on our show here.
Okay.
What's a
Yeah.
dystopian one I've read that I mean,
Yeah, what
obviously
are some
like
other dystopian books?
1984 is yeah is great. We've done Animal Farm. Um, oh, I feel like I read something recently that was kind of
Does
dystopian.
Michael Crichton have any dystopian books?
Not really.
Not really. Okay.
No, he didn't. He was more of like what do you call it? He was more like about more technology focused. Like all of his books were
Okay.
more had more of
Yeah.
a technological edge than
Mhm.
dystopian edge. I'm trying to think of what I've read that's recently that's also dystopian. I can't I can't think of a good book that I've done recently. That's kind of a
Mm,
shame.
dystopian
Maybe
book.
Fight Club in a way. That's kind
Ooh,
of
Fight Club's not
although
bad.
Fight
Yeah.
Club, I mean, it's not
Fight Club
sci-fi,
could work.
but it's dystopian in the sense of like it's very anti-capitalism.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
the main character works. a very boring office job, and
Mhm.
he craves something more in his
Fight
life.
Club would, yeah, Fight Club might be like that's probably a close to dystopian. That's really more of like a character study. I don't know.
Does
Maybe
Watchmen count? Watchmen's pretty dystopian, even though it's a graphic.
Washington's pretty dystopian, yeah. Another book we mentioned earlier, Fahrenheit 451, talk about burning. That could be dystopian.
Yeah, so that's another one that I also own that I tried to read years ago, and
Okay.
I couldn't for some reason I couldn't really.
Okay.
Also,
That was
anything
very
by Kurt
slow.
Vonnegut would probably be dystopian. Uh,
Kurt Vonnegut. Maybe,
yeah,
maybe some of his. I don't know. He's more sci-fi, I would say, first, and then like there's definitely dystopian elements, maybe, but
yeah, yeah, that's true.
like Slaughterhouse 5. I'll say Fahrenheit 451 is one. Have you read The Handmaid's Tale at all?
Again, another book that I own that I've yet
Another
to read.
okay. Another one,
I
really.
want to read it, and I've only watched the first season of the show,
Okay.
and this was years ago when it came out, and I was married. I was still, married at the time, and
Yeah.
uh, we watched the first season, and then we couldn't do the second season because of how dark it
Okay.
was. And
Yeah.
ever
Yeah.
since I just never went back to watch it. But I know what it's about, and I have the book because I do want to read. I've heard the book is great.
Okay.
And that's the other thing we should do more books by great books by female authors. We have Ursula K. Le Guin.
Yeah.
Not today. We
We
just did
got
Octavia
two. We got
Butler.
back to back right here. Yeah.
Yeah,
Very good.
Handmaid's Tale was written by a woman. I forget her
Okay.
name, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I'll have to look it
Mhm.
up since I'm talking about it. But yeah, I feel like that would be a good one to do too. And Fahrenheit 51 for
Yeah.
Fahrenheit 451. Because that one's about book burning, right? That one's about like
Mhm.
getting rid of
That's what the
like
firefighters do in the future. Firefighters actually burn books in the future.
yeah, because the theme of that is to not have people be informed,
Yeah.
educated, right?
Not critical thinkers. Yeah.
Margaret Atwood is
Margaret
who
Atwood. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, the
So,
point of Fahrenheit 451 is for people to not be educated. And
mm.
again, it's like this current world we're living in is hitting on all the major dystopian
Definitely.
themes of every
I'd
major
say so.
dystopian
Every
book,
major
right?
dystopian book I know, it's all kind of
Yeah.
coming to a head, isn't it?
I mean, you think about what's happening in Florida, what's happening in Texas, and just
Mhm.
books being banned because they
Yeah.
don't jive with the theocratic,
Yep.
outlooks of the people in charge. I mean, that couldn't be more relevant, I think. So,
Oh yeah.
I think
Um,
I think after Brave New World, Fahrenheit 451 would be the next one to do.
maybe if you want to really go to a dark place, all those dystopian books, but
I mean, listen, I'm
more
already in a dark place every day,
dystopian.
so
Okay.
that
Oh, one
isn't going
more
to
book
change much.
to think about. Have you read Lord of the Flies? That can be considered dystopian.
I read that in like middle school, high school. It's been a
Okay.
very long
Okay.
time.
Okay.
That book, that book
That's
will mess
dark.
you up a little bit too.
Yeah, yeah. Because that one's about kids too. So that one kind of has like it's pretty
Yeah,
twisted because it's talking about children and what they'll do to each other when like
yeah,
left alone.
yeah. Which is great being a parent and thinking about that stuff.
Although I always I think it's funny now that I'm older because I do remember reading it. I was like, now that I'm older, I was like, you know what, this is unrealistic. Kids would not do this. Kids would like do they would do silly stuff. They would definitely bully each other and hurt each other, but they would also do really silly stuff too. And I feel like there's not enough silly in there for me.
I
And I was like,
agree.
but
You want to
he's
hear
making
something
he's
really
making a
dark?
point. He's making a point about like the human nature, not just kids. I think he just used kids to like
No, yeah,
drive it home more.
absolutely. But do you want to hear something really dark?
What's up?
And this is real. This is 100% real.
Okay.
And I learned this recently, uh, that whenever they build a new prison somewhere, the way that they decide how many beds that prison's going to need, you know how
Mhm.
they go about it. They look at the current
Chemistry.
third grade reading level in the
Mm,
area,
okay.
and they look at the stats for that, and they see like, okay, this is a percentage of third graders who are not passing or not at the reading level they should be,
Uh-huh.
and we're gonna make that many beds based on
Huh.
that number of kids
He's on that number. Oh, well.
because they
Yeah,
predict
I heard about
with
that
with
before.
good certainty that percentage of kids that is not able to read at a third grade level
Uh,
is gonna somehow end up in prison.
huh. Okay.
If that's not dystopian and dark, I
I
don't
know
know
it
what
sounds
is.
like
I
that's
don't know
yeah,
what
it
is,
sounds
dude.
pretty twisted there, but yeah.
So again, as a parent, it's great to know this stuff, right? Because
Yeah.
you
How
know
important education is, at least getting past third grade, the reading level.
how important education is and how they're working so hard to dismantle it
Right. At the same
right
time.
now as we
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens when you
I
have a
mean,
failed
and they
administration.
have been, right? Like this isn't anything new either. They've
Mm,
been destroying public education in this country for probably before we were even born, by the way.
probably. That's why it's still so underfunded today, you know.
Yeah.
Back on it. So,
Which is like I don't know I'm not I don't consider myself that smart of a person. I really don't. I'm not just saying that. I do okay for myself,
well,
but
you
I'm
sound pretty
so
smart to
glad.
me.
Well, I
You're
appreciate that.
underselling yourself there. Come on.
I'm just so glad that I have a reading comprehension above the third grade level.
He's like, at least you got that going for
Yeah, at least I got
you.
that. I
Yeah.
have nothing else going for me, but at least I have
Yeah,
that
but I
going
got
for
that going for me. I can read a book third grade level.
me. No, so
Okay.
yeah, so that's man, that's why education is so. And you know what? And I'll get on another book related thing. A lot of people will talk crap about like, oh, people who read smut or read romantasy or read whatever. It's like, look, as
Yeah,
long as people are reading, that's all that matters. Who cares what they're reading?
for the
Who
most
cares
part.
if
Yeah.
it's romance?
Yeah,
Who cares if it's
for sure.
smut, romantasy? Like, who cares? They're reading. Like,
Yeah.
reading a book does more for your brain than watching TV, watching
Yeah.
TikTok, watching,
Yeah,
you know
for
what I mean?
sure.
It's you have to like disassociate from reality and you have to visualize this world in your head.
Yeah, you have
Even if you
to
have
work your
the
brain a
thing
little
that
bit.
you have, right, which where you don't really visualize things, but you still process the
Yeah.
information, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, who cares
Absolutely.
what people are reading as long as they're reading? That's all that matters,
Yeah.
you know.
Spend some
Dolly
effort in.
Parton knows how the importance of reading. Look at Dolly Parton, and people love her.
It's like the second time you mentioned it, you got to get on the podcast.
Can we
So.
get her on the show? Yes,
Get on
let's
the
get
show.
her on the show.
We'll get her on the
Anyway, well, hey, speaking of books,
show.
speaking of reading, speaking of writing, you have a book coming out soon here, David.
Yes.
Tell us
So
about
yeah. Speaking
Project
of
Red Planet.
Yeah, speaking of dystopian, speaking of books that will soon be banned, how about that? I'm going to market my book as a book that will be banned. It's called Project Red Planet. I talked about it before on the channel here. Yeah, I just released it as an ebook, so it should be coming out tomorrow or Monday, actually. So Amazon will notify me as an ebook.
Congratulations.
Paperback. I actually should be getting the paperback like a promo copy. It's gonna have a cool fancy watermark on it and everything. And I hope to like maybe I'll bring that on the show here like the next month or something. I can like have it here in physical copy, and then that the paperback will be available probably like this week sometime. But yeah, the book's awesome. You've read it, Adrian. Thank
I
you for being
have,
an early. I appreciate that very much.
of course.
And I you read a review for us, and maybe we'll talk about it here on the podcast as well coming up in the next month or two. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, it's a
I did read
crazy,
it.
crazy science fiction. It's satire. It's out there. It's political. It's philosophical. It's everything. It's weird. It's fun.
It's
I
very
think
weird.
I think the thing that when I first started, Douglas Adams was still is a big inspiration to me. So I really wanted to do as much satire as I possibly could, make it as ridiculous as I could, and it probably took me way too long to do that, but I still did that. And I think it's good because it's definitely not dystopian. It's definitely like a fun book. It's silly. It's, weird. But
It's
also makes
very
people think a little bit.
satirical. Yeah,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's a very satirical take on the current state of the world we're living in, right?
Yeah.
And you obviously take it to an extreme, which is what makes it
Right.
funny. You have
Right.
aliens,
Yeah.
you have moon aliens, you have
Yeah.
reptilian lizard aliens that
Mhm.
secretly control the government.
Yeah.
You have Martian aliens. You have this
Yep. Yeah. Got 'em all.
jellyfish-shaped, super
Yeah.
hyper
Right.
intelligent
And
alien
people, yeah,
race.
yeah. So, yeah, people read
Yeah,
about the skeptoids at the end. They're like this philosophical race of aliens. They're big
yeah.
weirdos.
You
Yeah.
have you don't have real bombs. You have logic bombs, and
There's logic bombs. Yeah.
the
Logic bombs.
best part, though, the best part is the Kurtoffel puffer.
Oh yeah, you can show. Do you have a picture of that? You can bring that up
I-
actually.
I'll 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 put it in the edit.
You
I
put it,
don't.
okay, yeah. Kartoffel puffer is definitely big in the book because Neil, the main character, eats a bunch of that from his ufologist friends, the German, and they cook that
Von
up.
Geiger.
Von
That's
Geiger.
how I was
You really
doing.
like
By
Von
the way,
Geiger? Which,
yeah, I like Von Geiger. I was
were you
doing.
doing an Arnold? Were you doing an
Oh
Arnold
yeah, I was
impression?
like, we
Okay,
have to get to the UFO people to
yeah.
drop the logic bombs,
Good logic about
Manley
yeah.
Ed or Grau. What was Grau? Grau was the
Yeah.
girl. L.
Frau White.
Frau.
Calls her Frau White. Yeah.
Frau White and
Miss,
Ed Manley.
Mrs.
We have to save the world in order to. But
Yeah, I
let's
could
first
have.
feast on Kartoffelpuffen.
Yeah, if there's any German readers out there, like you have an advantage. Because like when I wrote it too, I was like, I'm not German, so I have to look up all these words. So I'm like, look at all those
Yes.
German. Because I wanted my initial character was someone from Europe, and I eventually just was like, I'm
No,
gonna
German's
settle.
great.
I'm gonna do German. So
The
there
key
you
to
go.
German is that W words, they pronounce them as a V.
Like a V.
So,
Yeah. V.
Viva saves the world. Viva
Yes.
saves the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
Honey
Yeah.
butter, get me some kartoffelpuffer.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. There's lots of fun, lots of crazy characters, as
Yeah.
Adrian has mentioned. So,
Yeah,
but yeah,
lots
it's a
of
fun book.
it's an
So,
ensemble piece. I
yep.
In my head I was thinking Douglas Adams, but I was also thinking Mel Brooks, and
Yeah.
this could be
Yeah. I think
like
that
us.
works.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, he could easily, if he
Yeah.
was a younger whippersnapper, he
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
easily turn this into a movie like along the lines of Spaceballs or
Yeah.
Brave, not Brave New World. What's the one? History of the World or
History of the world. You also mentioned it
Frankenstein.
before. I think when you started it, it's kind of like Doctor Strangelove vibes, maybe a little bit.
Oh yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah. Because
political. It's also about political jokes. So
you have the
make fun of the
shadowy
president.
the
Yeah.
shadowy government that's running the world
Yeah.
and pulling the
Yeah.
strings and
For
all
sure.
that. You have
Yeah.
a lot going on in that story. I mean, it's a
A lot.
445 page book, David. So
Yeah. Yeah.
you have a
Yeah. I think,
lot
yeah,
to
yeah.
cover in
There's
that
a
story.
lot. There's a lot of
But
humor. There's a lot of craziness. I probably would have cut it if I had to rewrite it again. I think I probably would have cut more and get to the good
yeah,
stuff a little faster. But it's fun. It's a fun
yeah.
ride.
You got totally not Stanley Kubrick, totally not Christopher Nolan.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got Dick
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
Yes, I do. He's a
Everyone
fun one.
sees
Just,
Dick
yeah, yeah.
Gorgeous.
I think
You know who
I
I
think
pictured as Dick Gorgeous?
who?
Walton Goggins. I don't know why.
Oh yeah, you talked
I
to
pictured
Walton
him in
Goggins.
like some
I feel like you need a bigger
silvery,
guy though.
yeah, like some
I feel
silvery
like you need like
short
a bit
shorts. No,
more
he's
burly
buff
guy.
though. He's buff.
He
Walton
is,
Goggins is
yeah,
buff.
he's in shape. Yeah.
He's tall and he's very lean and buff.
He's kind
Not
of
like,
lean and muscular.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking kind of more bulkier, but I don't
I was picturing him in like some space age silver short shorts and like silver boots
know. I
and
mean,
like
that
a
could work.
ray gun. He's
That
like,
could
I'm
totally
here
work.
to kill some
Yeah,
aliens and
yeah.
kiss some
Yeah.
babes, you
Kiss some
know?
babes. Yeah, whatever. Yeah. I have a lot of fun with I had a lot of fun with coming up with the various Dick Gorgeous movie titles, in case you haven't noticed
We
that
can't
too.
say them on this show,
But, no, I
unfortunately.
guess not. But yeah, people can read them. So well, we could
Yeah.
talk about the future maybe.
I still think you should do a sequel where men are from Mars, women are from Venus, and you call it Project
Yeah.
Hot Plot.
You know what's really funny is actually one of my early read he didn't finish the book, but another friend of mine, he started it. And I was like, you know what? Dick Gorgeous, like that's a whole series right there. You can just do all his movies right there and just
Oh
write him
yeah.
books. Like you could do because he's a real character, I think that's one of the I mean, we'll talk about the book more, but like he as a character, like he's just so out there and, so flamboyant and crazy and egotistical. That's like a perfect character for crazy satirical book.
Yeah, it's a fun read. I mean, it's very much like how you said. It's very in line with like Douglas Adams, Mel Brooks kind of stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
And who doesn't appreciate a good satire?
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with making not a dystopian, but like a story that's like that takes a lens to like the current state of affairs and makes it funny. You know what I mean? And
I
I think
think I
that's what
think
you accomplish with this story.
Yeah,
So
I hope so. I think the end too, even though it is satirical and over the top, like there's a kernel there of truth that I just wish maybe one day the ending can come through. People will know what they're talking about when the book is out. So
I mean, we just need to
Amen.
carpet bomb the whole world with logic bombs.
Maybe,
That's what
maybe.
that's what we really need is a logic
Logic
bomb.
bombs. Yeah, yeah. Maybe we don't need education, we need logic bombs.
We need both.
We need both.
We're
We need
gonna
both.
need both.
We need both. Okay.
So
Yeah. But yeah, the book's about to come out, so check
yeah,
it, check it or wreck it.
yeah.
Or read
Follow
it.
David on Blue Sky. As he promotes the book. Instagram
Yes.
is your Instagram open or is it locked? I don't remember.
I think it's was it Instagram or TikTok? I think my TikTok was like not uploading. I think
Well,
Instagram
either
still.
way, Baby Sagan. Follow
Yeah.
David on as Baby Sagan on
YouTube,
all
Blue Sky.
platforms. Yeah,
Yeah.
Blue Sky,
YouTube,
everything.
Blue Sky.
And
I'll be
keep
promoting
up
my book.
there's a big community of writers on Blue Sky, so you should definitely use that platform to like
Yeah. And I know your friend too, Jordan, he wrote a book, so I'm
he
interested
did.
in
I'm also reading
reading
through
his
his.
book. So.
I put it on pause to read yours, but now I got to
Okay,
finish
yeah, yeah.
his.
Yeah, I gotta
So
go bounce that
I
one.
think I'll ask him. I don't think he'll mind sending you a copy of his book to read
Yeah.
if you're
Yeah.
keen because
That'd be fine, yeah.
it's not a comedy, but it is sci-fi, very much
Yeah.
sci-fi, and
Yeah.
that's our cup of tea. So I think
Yeah.
you'll
Yeah.
appreciate it. So
Yeah. What's the name of
yeah,
his book?
his book is called Edge of Eden, and it's a sci-fi novel. I can't even really explain it honestly.
Okay.
And that's not a bad thing either. But it's essentially a book where in this world. There's a hyper advanced AI computer that can take molecules from past and present and put them back into the state they were originally in. So it's
Mhm.
almost like a reborn, a futuristic rebirth type of project where they can bring people back to
Okay.
life.
Interesting.
And there's several factions at odds with each other in this story, and there's a lot of sort of political dynamics, involved, and it's
Okay.
really good, man. It's a very
Sounds interesting.
dynamic book, a very dynamic
Okay.
story.
Yeah.
And like you, he's been working on that story just in
Long
general
time.
for a while. So,
Okay.
he's
Yeah.
finally at a point now where he's been rewriting it for a while, and then he'll eventually get to a point here pretty soon where he'll end up trying to get it published as well. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
good
Sounds good.
stuff.
Sounds interesting. Yeah.
My sci-fi book,
Cool.
which I started and have not yet to finish, is not as
Yes.
complex as your guys' is. Mine's more about
Okay.
colonization and stuff, and there's
Yeah. Is
also
that the one
several
that,
factions and
is that the one I
and
read the first chapter on
yeah,
or?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
There's
What was the name? Is like time, something about time?
so the current title that I've been going with is The Essence of Time,
Essence of
Volume
Time. Okay.
1,
Okay.
Conquest, which I know is a mouthful.
Okay.
But conquest, that's the key. That's the big word you
I
got to
mean, you could
remember.
say you could call it time conquest or something. I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
just,
that
you
I'll
know,
have to workshop that.
conquest of time. I don't
Conquest of that
know.
reminds me of Planet of the Apes in a way,
Maybe.
Conquest for the
All right.
Planet of the Apes. But
Anyway,
yeah,
we'll have to brainstorm that.
yeah. Anything else you wanted to talk about before we sign off here,
I
David?
think we're good. Read Octavia Butler, read some dystopian books, and read my book, Project Red Planet, coming out very shortly.
Perfect. All right. Well, I think we did it. Follow me on Blue Sky at Boots Too Big. I'm also on TikTok at Books Too Big. If you can keep those two straight. Follow the show. We're now on YouTube, YouTube podcast.
Nice.
For those of you listen to podcasts through YouTube, which by the way, Google killed the Google Podcast app, so everything now is on YouTube Music as far as podcasts go. So we're on there now. Find us on YouTube at Book Brothers Podcast, and I think that's it. I think we did it, David.
Yep. See you
All
next
right.
time.